Hello, and welcome to Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast. I am your host, Josh Carr, and welcome to Series 2. This is the first episode. We're back, and it's safe to say we're back with a bang because we've got a great guest today, a fantastic guest. It's Douglas Mackinnon. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Josh. Nice to meet you, and nice to be on the podcast.
Yes, it's lovely to have you here. Obviously, a lot of people are going to know who you are already. For those who don't know, of course, you are an esteemed television director, and you've done a lot of work on Doctor Who in the past. Yeah. So I mean, I've got the list of episodes here, which is quite the list. It's a list that of a lot of episodes that are often near the top of people's favourites. So you've got the Sontaran Stratagem, the Poison Sky two-parter, you've got the Power of Three, Cold War, Listen, Time Heist, Flatline, and the Husbands of River Song, which is, like I said, quite the list. But before we get into that, I wanted to sort of take things back to before you were working on Doctor Who. So what was your experiences with Doctor Who beforehand? Were you a fan growing up, or was it something that you came to when the show came back, or what were your experiences with it?
Well, I was born and brought up on the Isle of Skye in the Hebrides, and we only had one channel, BBC 405 lines black and white, when I was growing up. Yeah. So that was it. That was, it was the one place that you could go to for television. And I love Doctor Who. I loved it. I can't remember it not being around. I'm old enough for it. It just started just after I was born. So you can age me from that if you like. But I can't remember it not being there and not loving watching it. And I still get, by the time it moved into colour, because we only got colour on the Isle of Skye in 1978, I still see episodes now that make me jump because they're in colour, not black and white.
Yeah, that's quite late, isn't it? Because it came to colour in 1970, I think it was.
Yeah, well, we were late for quite a few things, just because of the geography of the place.
Yeah,
but no harm in that. I mean, I remember Star Trek was the other thing, and again, I jump when I see it in colour even now, because I grew up with it in black and white. And I remember, I think it was the Autons was the first sort of the plastic sofa moment, that a lot of people remember, because it so happened my sister had just bought one of an armchair in blow-up plastic armchair, and when she got it, I always tried to sit in it, and then I saw that episode, and she got very confused about why I wasn't interested anymore in sitting on it.
Yeah, it's a moment and an episode and an era that's come up a lot, especially over the past few episodes. Because obviously, my last guest was Katie Manning, and we spoke a lot about, obviously, that was, Terror of the Autons was their first episode, and then a couple of guests that I've had beforehand always talk about those Autons being just nightmare inducing, and it being a really, really scary villain, even when people are watching them like in the 90s and the early 2000s. So yeah, that's interesting. So it's quite an interesting way to.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I always banged on Stephen Moffat about. The creature that I wanted to bring back was the Yeti. That was my big one.
Yeah.
That I remember that silver ball and everything, and
he
would never buy it. He said it's just going to look like a man in a big coat,
Yeah,
that's scary. I've made things scary for you where there's nothing there. Like
that is true. You definitely have. So obviously you started off as a fan of the show, and you're a fan growing up. Obviously, then the show goes away and it comes back. And in between that time, that's sort of when you start your career as a director, because obviously it's not just Doctor Who that you're known for. I mean, even in the past few years, you've been working on things like Line of Duty and Good Omens, which are massive programs and amazing programs as well. But yeah, so was there any inspiration from Doctor Who for you getting into the TV industry? I know a lot of people are inspired by it when they're younger.
No, I wouldn't say that, but I took a strange sort of diversionary route to documentary and stills photography before coming back to fiction again. I ended up going to the National Film School in Beaconsfield and was seeking a career in independent film, to be honest, and that didn't click for whatever reason. And I started doing episodic television in the sort of mid-90s. The 9 o'clock shows. Well, I started off in the Bell, and then as a lot of people did in those days, and then I ended up doing the huge shows that were just about ending on ITV for a little while, like Soldier and London's Burning. I did London's Burning when they'd run out of money for fires. So I actually did an episode where there was a big fire alert and everybody jumped on the fire engine with big fire appliances, we had to call it, with great big sort of music thumping, and they drive out of the fire station, and it was a false alarm. So there was all the build-up.
All the build-up, but no payoff.
Yeah, and it was round about then I started looking around and wanted to see if I could start a television series, and a big drama series. And I was introduced to a young man who was just about to do his very first, a writer who was doing his first series for ITV on grown-up television, and that was Russell T Davies. So I did the first episodes of The Grand with Russell, and it was his first, like I say, grown-up 9 o'clock show, and it was mine as well as a leading director. So it was a big thing for both of us, and it worked pretty well, I think. It lasted a couple of series. And then I went off and did other things, and then I made a film called The Flying Scotsman, which got me in to see Heartswood, which is Stephen Moffat's part of that company. And I went to see them about doing an adaptation of Jekyll and Hyde called Jekyll, which we did. And that was my first meeting with Stephen. And I can't exactly remember how it worked, but I think I'd been talked about doing Torchwood or going to do it very happily. And of course, Russell had been in charge for a couple of years on Doctor Who, and it just hadn't clicked. But suddenly, Stephen put a word in about what Jekyll looked like, and the doors opened, and I went and did the Centaurans with Russell. Yeah. So that was my way into the show.
Yes, and obviously growing up, as you mentioned before, like growing up in that era, in the 70s when that's pretty much where the Sontarans made like 90% of their appearances was in that era. What was it like being able to bring that massive monster back who we hadn't seen yet? Because obviously we'd had the Daleks and the Cybermen, and this was one of the ones that was sort of floating about that we hadn't seen yet, that we were all excited to see.
Can I be rude and pick you up on a word there, monster?
Go on.
Because
monster, I should not use.
No, well, everybody does, and I really don't mean it in a sort of silly way, but I always prefer the word creature because it makes them more dignified. Usually the creatures in Doctor Who are just trying to do even the Daleks are just trying to do their own destiny, and I just find myself feeling more empathetic towards them if I call them creatures rather than and they can do monstrous things, that's for sure.
Yes, the Sontarans definitely do monstrous things, but yeah, you are right. They're not really monsters. They're more soldiers, aren't they? Yeah. Go ahead.
No. I was just thinking about the Sontarans, and there's a couple of things that I remember about doing them. Well, the first one that I've said the story before, but I like it, so I'm going to say it again. My first day on the TARDIS with David Tennant. And I remember just standing there before rehearsals that started around about 5 to 8 in the morning, and standing on the TARDIS and just thinking, blimey, this is weird. This is really weird now. And David came up behind me just about to start rehearsal, and he put his arm around me and he said, "We've all been there. You're feeling like you're 8 years old, but you're supposed to be an adult as well." he sort of gave me a hug, and he said, I'd start with a wide shot, and walked away. And I thought, and if I didn't like him before that, it was just such a lovely, sweet thing to do, just to help me through that day. But it was really exciting, filming on the TARDIS and doing things like that. And the Centaurans, another thing I remember talking about, the classic Doctor Who, because as everybody who's listening to this will know, the Centaurans are a classic creature as well. So and I obviously went back and looked at all the old episodes as prep for doing them. And I remember going to and we also brought back Unit in those episodes. And I remember going to the Tower of London, because they were supposed to, Unit's HQ, if you remember, was underneath the Tower of London.
Yes. Yeah.
And I went to the real Tower of London and stood there and realised that I was standing in the same place as the directors of old would have stood to try and work out how to do things. So there's a simple thing. So, in those episodes, there's an arrival of a posh car in through the gates, which we ended up doing in a castle in Wales. But I stood there at the Tower of London and realised you can't get a car in here. You can't do that, Even if we got access to the Tower of London, we couldn't actually do the scene.
Yeah.
And just thinking, these previous directors would have stood there and done the same thing and gone, you can't get a car in here.
Yeah, definitely taken a few creative liberties with the infrastructure of the Tower of London.
And then the other memory of the Centaurans is with Catherine Tate, who's amazing, as everybody knows. But we were filming one day, and we'd been filming with the Centaurans for about a week, even 2 weeks. And we went to this factory to shoot, and so it meant that Catherine, for the first time, had to walk through the guys who were playing the Centaurans' dressing room for the first time to get to set. And she'd been called on set, and I just heard this huge scream. I mean, like a really serious scream coming from somewhere off. And Catherine came running in, and she was out of breath, and she said, "There's people in there." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "There's people inside the Centaurans." I said, what did you think they were? Did you think they were actually Centaurans? She said, "Well, I didn't know." So I don't know what. That's a special brain.
But yeah, I mean, growing up, because that was one of my favourites, and I loved the Centaurans. And it was my first Centauran story when I was younger. So I absolutely love that episode.
Thank you.
And well, there's plenty more to come, because there's so many episodes to talk about. Because one thing that strikes me about your time on Doctor Who as well is that so many different eras that you've worked across is that you were there at the back end of David's era, and then you came back towards the back end of Matt's era, and then you're sort of there dotted through the beginning of Peter's, and then back again near the back end of Peter's era. So it's a really long span. It's like across like 9-10 years, I think, your episodes.
Yeah.
So I was just intrigued about what it was like each time, because obviously I know that you did obviously the Centauran one I see as sort of like standalone, and then the Power of Three and Cold War in the same series, and then you've got 3 in the same series with Listen, Time Heist and Flatline, and then the Christmas special. What were the differences between, I mean, say for example Russell's era and Stephen's era, in terms of directing and freedom that you'd have on set?
Yeah. Are you trying to get me into trouble here?
I'm not. Definitely not trying to get you into trouble. Definitely not.
Doctor Who's and showrunners on Doctor Who are like your children. You don't have a favourite. That's the rule.
Oh yeah, no. I could never ask to pick a favourite.
No, but never. There was differences just in the material. Russell had it's plain for everyone to see. Russell had a different sensibility from Stephen on the show, and so does Chris. He's got a different view of it as well, and that's the joy of the show, is that ability to change not just the Doctor but the main writers as well, and the directors as well. And listen, the progress. There's one bit of progress that's really obvious, is the arrival of CG as a thing on the show properly. With the Centaurans in the 2 episodes, I think I had 6 CGI shots in the whole of the 2 episodes. So we had to do everything practically, pretty much, and nothing wrong with that. But Flatline, I seem to remember we had something like 150 CGI shots in one episode. And so that's a huge leap that we suddenly, we were building the access to that technology during that time. But you know what? The thing that I think is consistent is the rules of Doctor Who when it's working are actually quite simple, and for me it's whenever a writer or a showrunner touches on those simple rules that the magic happens. And now you're going to ask me what the rules are. The rules are kind of to do. I've never been able to nail them down, and if I could, I'd be sure running it myself. And
yes,
and that would be interesting. But the rules are to do with the vocabulary of the show, and the simplicity of the TARDIS arriving in a place where there's trouble, and the Doctor can't leave until after the trouble's been sorted out. That's just a beautiful shape for a television show and for an adventure. And then the rules, the aliens or whatever the creature of the week is, or whatever the thing of the week is, should be exotic and weird and fantabulous and different each time, but also reflect back on human beings. And the rule that the show is really about the companion. That really the companion is there to kind of represent us as human beings, because the companion can see what the Doctor can't see and see the wonder of it all. Yeah. And wonder is a huge rule. If you lose the wonder, I went through a couple of times when, Doctor Who's had lots of great directors, but occasionally somebody would arrive and say, "Oh, I'm a little bit bored with the TARDIS arriving. Do we have to do that?" And I'd be in the production office going, "That's the show, mate. That's the show. The TARDIS arriving is the show, and show it and enjoy it and love it. And some of my favorite moments were doing arrivals of TARDIS in different places. When it arrived inside a bedroom, or it arrives inside, in a really tight space and an unusual place. But the rules can also be flexible because theoretically, as you know, the TARDIS is pretty ropey in where it lands. It is not very accurate where it lands. Yeah. But it can be if you want it to be. Whenever the writers write it and everything else. So that's the joy of it. And the psychic paper and, sonic screwdriver, you've got to love those things. And every time somebody comes on and directs it and they do that and they kind of fetishize those things, I just love it. So those would be my favorite moments.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that, because I've been watching a few of the episodes back over the past week, and I was actually thinking earlier today, like, Douglas really likes just cramming the TARDIS into tight spaces, because you've got the TARDIS landing in living rooms and bedrooms and submarines, exactly. Yeah. And it genuinely popped into my head, so it's funny that you said that. Yeah. But yeah, so one episode that I wanted to touch on in particular was Listen, because just personally, I love that episode. It's one of my favourite from Peter's era, and it's one of my favourite performances from Peter as well. I just think from the moment he's on screen in that story, you're captivated with anything he's got to say, because he's theorising and he's talking to himself. But there's so many iconic bits of imagery from Peter's era as well that have come out of that episode. And one shot in particular is where you've got Peter sat cross-legged on top of the TARDIS, floating through space. Where did that idea come from? Because it's such a beautiful bit of imagery. I was just intrigued as to where that came from.
Well, it came initially from Stephen Moffat's head. That's where it came from.
I can imagine. It looks like a Stephen idea.
Yeah.
Just when I see it.
We all directors stand on the shoulders of the writing, and so do the actors. So it came from Stephen's. I think the thing that I worked on was making that one shot work, and having him, because I think Stephen had written it that he was sitting on top of the TARDIS, and then you cut to seeing where the TARDIS is and the doors are open and all that sort of stuff. And my memory, if I'm correct, is that it was me that said, "Can we do all of that in one shot? Can we, can we come down and find him and do that whole thing?" And I can't remember exactly the pattern of the shot right now, but I remember working hard on that, and I just thought it was magical from the start, you know. And I knew when I got the script, or I knew when I got the first half of the script, because I remember it was very late in, which is normal for Stephen as well. But you know when you're going to get it, it's going to be gold. But this one was really special. That just thinking it was a privilege to do that episode, because I just knew how, when you get a great script and you know it when you read, as you're reading it, you just know how to direct it, and it's a matter of getting the shots that serve that vision that Stephen's given you. And so all the way through to the detail of the little boy in the bed's his haircut. I got a picture of William Hartnell when he was a kid, and we copied that. So that
really?
That haircut is the same as William Hartnell's when he was 9.
That is incredible attention to detail. I love that.
So I love delving into that sort of detail, because I just think even if the audience, even if somebody like you who loves the show doesn't get it, somewhere subliminally the vocabulary is truthful.
Yeah, of course.
And it just means that's why it comes out. And it was the same with. So the barn originally wasn't supposed to be that barn. It was supposed to be just any old barn in Wales somewhere, or any old barn in England, and obviously represented Gallifrey, but it wasn't supposed to be that. And we went to see a few barns, and they were really they were like barns, in fact. Yeah. And the amount of effort we were going to have to do to make it a workable place that we could shoot in, and we had quite a lot to do in there, and it was delicate work and everything else. And I just remember Michael Pickwood, the designer, sort of saying, well, you know, we do have the barn from the 50th in storage. You know, what about that one? And I immediately went, yep, that's it. And we stopped looking for a barn. And I said to Stephen, what about the 50th? And he was still writing the script, so that's why it suddenly got adapted into it. You know, and again, it's part of the vocabulary of that episode. Is so rooted in the series history, and that just helped it. It was another layer for the audience to go, hang on, that's the same barn.
Yeah.
You know, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I definitely know what you mean.
And it made retro sense that's why they all met up in that barn.
Yeah. But yeah, it's little touches like that the fans love as well.
Yeah.
And it, like you said, it does just tie everything up, because I don't think it would have impacted on the episode negatively if it was just a barn at all. I think it still would have worked, but it's just those extra little touches that finish it off.
It turns it up. And as far as Peter's concerned, I mean, I shot those 2 episodes, I think it was Time Heist and Listen Together in a block straight after Ben Wheatley had done the first 2 of Peter's episodes. And it was fascinating because Ben had come in and did really good episodes, obviously, but he hadn't really worked with Peter on the character a lot, and everybody was just rushing to get going, and Peter hadn't worked at it. So in Listen, what you're seeing is partly Peter and I trying to work out where he's placing his doctor, you know, and where just tonally, you know, what his voice is going to sound like, and where he's going to be in terms of his look and his style and his movement. And we worked on that a lot on that episode. And it's partly because we're both Scottish. We've got no fear of offending each other, because we just insult each other all the time. So it's kind of a straightforward relationship. And he was very good about taking very straightforward directing from me, and I took tons back from him as well, and tried to mold the character a bit. The very first scene we did together was the scene outside the children's home when Clara and he arrived to go inside. And, that was a tough night for directing that and for acting, because when you've got a great actor like Peter, he can offer up a menu of types of performances that are myriad, and finding the right place for the Doctor in that one was really, really important, because, and I think we got it right. And I think, you know, Peter's very kindly quite often mentions Listen in Dispatches as one of his favorite, if not his favorite episode. And I think it's because we just clicked. And another thing that had happened was, just by coincidence, I'd been in the production office on the last day of him picking his costume and us picking a costume for it. And Ben hadn't actually turned up at that point. So I was asked down by Brian Minchin just to come and talk to him. And I remember going into the costume department, and it's what you would expect. It was just full of clothes, full of choices, full of, what am I going to do? And I mean, apart from directing Doctor Who, it's one of my favorite memories is actually helping to choose the costume for our Doctor Who. That was a really exciting set of,
I bet it is,
and what's working, what's not working, what's mad and what's good mad and what's bad mad. And I mean, I love this look, and there's a bit of John Pertwee in there, but I think he made it his own as well. I think that's slightly mythologized, the John Pertwee reference. It was much more, what do we want this new Doctor to look like after Matt? After Matt's kind of cookie-looking character, is he going to get more stable, and because Peter's an older guy, how does that change things? Et cetera, et cetera. Really great, really interesting discussions.
Yeah, no, that sounds so cool. I think most of us would love to be in the room when a doctor's choosing their costume. That would be so cool, so cool. So yeah, obviously, there's so much to talk about because, like I said, there's so many different types of episodes as well. Like that's what struck me. Essentially doing a Douglas Mackinnon marathon is that I've been watching your episodes in particular, not in the context of their series, just in the context of your direction. And obviously we know that the way that Doctor Who runs is that, each week is a different genre. 1 week we're in space, 1 week we're in the Wild West, 1 week we're somewhere else. And it's never truer than with yours, because you've got this. You start off with this war epic with Sontarans and soldiers going toe to toe, and then you've got the Power of Three, which is a complete contrast to that, where it's for a lot of the runtime, it's just a family dynamic with Rory and Amy acting as the parents, and then this alien child just running about the place in Matt Smith. And then Cold War, you've got this submarine disaster, but it's also got these callbacks to like Alien. It feels like that kind of story where you've got this creature stalking everybody and you've got these creepy horrors. I mean, is it intentional of you? Obviously, I don't know how you go about getting selected for different episodes, or if you pitch an episode, I think I'd be good for this episode, or if Stephen says, I think you'd be good for this one. But is it an intentional decision of you to go down all of these completely different routes with it? Or is it just the nature of Doctor Who that you end up doing it, whether you like it or not?
Yeah, it's a mixture. I mean, it was Russell or Stephen that chose the director for... Yeah. Along with the other execs as well. They'd have a discussion about it. And I never... I don't know if other directors do this, but I never wanted to join in that discussion. I just wanted to be given, a challenge by Stephen, and which mostly it was Stephen, and see if I could pull it off. And that was the exciting thing, because I trust his taste and trust that he knows what I can do when I'm put up against the wall and faced with that. The thing that I do when I get an episode of Doctor Who to do is try and, if there's an obvious genre, like with the Husbands of River Song, screwball comedies or time heist movies or Cold War, it's kind of aliens, and I dig into that genre filmically so deep. I watch everything that I can from the past, from as far back as I can find anything, and also read a lot and just dig in right into the heart of it to try and find the rules for that genre. And then the trick is to pull off the genre within the Doctor Who genre. Yeah. And the rules we were talking about earlier, and somehow combine them and make them work together as a thing. So like in Time Heist, I'd never do slow motion sort of walking shots, but I did them because that's the genre, and had Clara and the Doctor and the other doing that Ocean's 11 walk, you know, and in Cold War, you know, doing that thing where the alien comes down and picks you up. That was fantastic fun. You know, my favorite Aliens movie is Aliens 3, the David Fincher one, and that to me is that was the marking point for Cold War. That's what they tried to do. But obviously, you're trying to do it. Even the budget that David Fincher had for Aliens 3 was, I'm sure, it's a little bit more than Cold War.
A little bit, I'd imagine. Yeah.
Even though it was about 20 years later, you know, it's still probably a lot more. But you know, that's the fight, and I talk a lot in pre-production and when I'm shooting about outcomes for shots, but trying to find a shot that it feels like it's absolutely solid as part of the genre, mixes up with the new genre, and even is lit that way as well, and the camera movements and everything. So everything, I get totally absorbed in the genre. So, but then you have to turn up and just shoot. So, so somewhere you're channeling all that knowledge into that one moment when you're just doing a shot. But it pops out, it comes out, and I think if I've got a skill, it's that I do my research really, really seriously and really deep dive into the genre. You know, for Husbands of River Song, I watched so many, you know, screwball comedies from the 20s, 30s, and 40s to try and get that understanding about how they worked, and it's shot in a way where after River turns up properly with the Doctor, after she realizes that who the Doctor is. I switch styles so that very often they're in a two-shot together, because that's the way that screwball comedies always worked. Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy would always be in a shot together, talking to each other, and that's what the shots that I love most in that episode are very simple ones, you know. And yeah, so that's how I go about it. So the genre thing is huge for me, and it, very often when episodes don't quite work. And no, I'm not going to name them, but when they don't quite work, I suspect it's because the genre has not been delved into enough, you know, because that's really when the show starts singing.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Look, I mean, Listen was an episode where it was the only episode that I can remember where Stephen had a word with me. He phoned me up the night before we started filming and said, I chose you especially for this because he said he'd gotten bored with, not bored, he'd gotten kind of exhausted is a better word, with doing the series opener and the series finale as his main contribution to the series. And the way he put it was, he said, so I've got to do a full orchestra with, you know, a choir and everything. It's all got to be, you know, singing and dancing and da-da-da-da. He said, I just wanted to do a piano solo for once. And that's what Listen is.
Yeah.
And that was such a lovely piece of advice, because I just treated it with care, like it was a piano solo, and didn't feel the need to make it all blustery and have heavy camera movement all over the place. So you try and cut your cloth to that episode, and in a way, you know, outside Doctor Who, the directing I do is kind of, I go by the same rules. I think there's kind of two types of directors. There's directors like Paul Greengrass, who's brilliant, who's got a style that he brings to his films, and when you sign up Paul Greengrass, that's where you're going to get, you know, he's slightly gone off in his last film, but you know, it's that whizzy camera movement, you know, with long lenses and everything else.
Yeah.
Whereas a director like I am, I go in and try and find the style for that show, for that episode, for that thing, and try and find the unique thing about it.
Yeah.
And try and make a style up and a vocabulary for that show.
Yeah, that again is another thing that stood out to me when watching them, is that these episodes, they obviously, I know that you've directed them and your style, like your direction is, you know, stamped all over the episode, but because these episodes are so different, it is quite hard to like try and pin down, you know, what kind of a director is Douglas Mackinnon. But you don't necessarily have to do that, and I quite like the fact that you don't have to do that for you. You know, you are someone who sort of molds to fit the episode rather than the episode fitting around you.
It's the story for me. The story is the thing, and very often on set, when you've shown the crew a scene that you're about to do, somebody, often the DOP or one of the operators, will come and say, "Oh, there's a great shot from over here. Why aren't we doing that?" And it's one of my rather annoying catchphrases. It might be a great shot over there, but the story is over there. That's why we're over there, you know.
Yeah.
So you can't. And then, of course, the ideal is to get a great shot with the story in it, and that's my target every day, is to find where the story is and then construct shots around the story. So that's the guiding influence. And what's going to be difficult for the characters each day? What shots are going to make it hard? You know, I'm thinking about, you know, a scene I love in Cold War is when the Ice Warrior turns up behind Matt Smith for the first time, and everybody else sees it, but he can't.
Yeah,
it's just that's like a perfect little Doctor Who sequence for me, because Matt was on top form that day, and so was Jen, and you know, and we had great other actors in the room as well, and it was all looks and stares, but it was just that turnaround of Matt's to look over his shoulder to find, all right, okay, that's great fun, and that's really pure Doctor Who to me.
Yeah, no, it is a great moment, and a great story as well. Are there any other? So obviously, there's a few episodes that we've talked about more than others, but are there any other like standout moments on set that when you think about it, not necessarily it was like the best day on set or the worst day on set, just a day like that where you've thought, this is just pure Doctor Who. This is who.
I think certainly doing the barn scene in Listen, where Jen goes up and Clara goes up and does the final speech, and it's more of a sequence to me, because that whole ending, the montage at the end, where she comes back into the TARDIS and the Doctor goes, "Where are we?" and she stops him going out, and we know why, but she can't really say why.
Yeah,
I think that little sequence is I love it because it's so pure as a Doctor Who thing, because it goes past the history of the show back to Doctor Who's childhood. It's William Hartnell in that bed for me. That's who's up there, and for Clara to bump into that, and then, you know, the whole thing with the grabbing of the leg under the bed, that created thing from Stephen, all of that is just so complete. It was just joyous. But I mean, I can't remember any bad days in Doctor Who, because I really did love directing it so much, and you know, each one of the Doctors had different things. I mean, David, who, as you might know, I've worked with recently on Good Omens again. I just remember thinking, you know, it can't get any better than this. And I remember talking to him about it. He was thinking about leaving at the time I was shooting, and he was saying, "Should I go?" You know, which turned into, "I don't want to go," when he did it. And I just knew how much it meant to him. And that's a moment that is interesting. So my son Thomas was aged about 9 when I did my first Doctor Who's, and I hadn't really met David, but he wanted to meet him, and the family came down to Cardiff, and the time that I thought I could introduce him briefly, because they were just about to head back home to Scotland, was at the beginning of the read through for those episodes.
Yeah,
and so I took Thomas in and said, "David, this is Thomas, my son," and they had a few words, but Thomas started to sort of blush, you know, because he was sort of staring at him, you know. And I said, "Right, okay, I think we'll just head off now." And I took him out, and you know, Mandy, my wife, was in the corridor, and Thomas started crying, you know. And I said, "Are you all right?" He said, "Yeah, no, this is brilliant. This is the best day of my life," you know. and I said, "Right, I've got to go back into the read through." And I went back into the read through, and David was crying. And I said, "What's up with you?" He said, "Well, I've just seen a little Scottish boy meeting Doctor Who." And that's what I did when I was little. And it was the same story. It was that repetition.
Yeah.
I love
that's
that.
So sweet.
So sweet, you know. Oh, and that was the thing with Thomas as well, that I was on the phone to him one day while I was filming, and he said, "Dad, is the TARDIS alive?" And I went, I'm not sure, to be honest. It's a good question, though. I'll tell you what. I'll ask Russell. So I emailed Russell. Thomas is asking if the TARDIS is alive, and Russell came back, said, I don't really know. It said, but it could go either way depending on how you view some of the earlier episodes. Why doesn't Thomas decide? And so I phoned up Thomas and said, okay, you get to decide if the TARDIS is alive or not. He said it definitely is.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible. What a moment.
That was TARDIS decided on, and that's
oh, well, that's beautiful. That's amazing. In the hands of a child.
A 9-year-old Scottish boy.
Yeah, as it should be. As it should be. Yeah.
He's now 22 and has just brought out his first computer game. He's a computer games designer. So it's called The Corridor and it's on Steam. So go and have a look, folks.
Yes, go and have a look. I definitely will. I'm definitely going to have a look at it.
It's a half-hour meta computer game that will send you crazy.
That's what we all need right now. Yeah. Sending crazy. Yeah. So just before we start winding down, we've got a little section here that we do every week where I get questions from our lovely listeners on Twitter. And we, in the words of David Tennant from Broadchurch, we fondly name it Bloody Twitter.
For God's sake! Bloody Twitter!
So we've got a few questions. We had so many questions, so I'm really sorry if we don't get around to it, to your questions.
Try and be brief.
But yes, we'll try and get through as many as we can. So a good friend of ours, Cal at generic_tweeting, asked, would you direct an episode of the current era of Doctor Who if you were asked? Obviously, I know that's quite an open question because you haven't got the details in front of you. But
the answer is yes, no doubt about it. And I mean, I work with Chris Chibnall on The Power of Three. I mean, I've been kind of busy the last few years, so doing other things. So, but I remember the day after the Sherlock episode, I won the Emmy for Best Television Movie.
Yeah,
I got signed to American Agents for the first time, and the first conversation I had with them was, they said, "So what do you want to do? What's your target?" And I said, "Well, I'd kind of like to do Star Wars, if that's okay." I said, "But there's a little thing that I've got to tell you. If you get me Star Wars, the next thing I want to do is Doctor Who again."
Yeah.
So that's how much I want to do Doctor Who again.
Oh, well, that's lovely. It's great to hear. Do you just a question of my own? Have you been watching the current era? Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, my son says it's the only show on television that we watch live.
Yeah,
which we do. So yes, completely. I love it. I think Jodie's amazing, and it's really it's just a different era. It's really fascinating, and because I've not been doing it, I get the treat of being able to watch it without knowing what's happening.
Yeah.
So it's a real pleasure, because for years I knew exactly what all the storylines were for all.
Yes. Yeah.
And that actually got boring a little bit.
Yeah, I was talking to Crystal D a few weeks ago, who used to host the fan show, and she was talking about how now she loves the fact that she's not on the inside of it, so she doesn't get to see any spoilers, and she gets to experience it live with everyone else.
There was a thing that I used to do for every episode that I directed, because there's a moment at the end of post-production where you've got all the CGI shots in, the picture has been locked, and the final thing you do usually is the sound mix. That's because you can't really do the sound mix till all the pictures are locked, so you can't really finalize it.
Yeah.
So and that's something that what happens is the sound mixer and yourself will spend days and days just doing it on your own, working your way through the episode. Then eventually the execs will come in and give notes about sound things and everything else. But there's a moment in there where the episode is effectively complete, and nobody else in the world has seen it. And I always used to do, just before the execs would come in, I just sit on the big black sofa in the mixing room and watch the episode through once, just on my own. And because it was one of the greatest privileges was to be able to see an episode of Doctor Who that nobody in the world had ever seen before completely, including Stephen Moffat and everybody else. But that was a treat. Yeah.
Oh no, that's great. I think that's exactly what everybody else would do as well. But yeah, I love that. Next question is from Mr. Maker MP at Cyberplanner1. Fantastic artist on Twitter, does amazing Doctor Who art. If anyone wants to go and have a look. He said, his question is, are there any scripts from the rest of Doctor Who that you've seen and you thought, I wish I could have worked on that? I wish, or you've had, this is my little addition to the question, like, is there any episodes you've seen and thought, I can see a way that I would have done that's different?
If it's okay, I'd rather answer the question in a slightly different way. Which
Go ahead. That's fine.
I think Heaven Sent is extraordinary as a piece of work, and I actually wouldn't want to touch it because Rachel Talalay did such an amazing job.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's absolutely amazing.
So there's that. But no, I mean, as a director, you have this thing, I call it the jealousy gene, that when you watch somebody else's work and you feel jealous about it, that usually means it's really good.
Yeah.
It's kind of annoying. I'm not sure I could have done that. It's not, so I actually go the other way, and I get fed up if I don't like an episode because of the directing, in my opinion, But listen, everybody's doing their damnedest to do great shows all the time.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So no, I don't really analyze. I don't really think in that way. I don't think, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that you say it like
that.
Yeah. Next question is from Jamie. He's always in here. He's always sending questions in at Jamie_season7. He said, what work for the show are you most proud of?
Hi, Jamie. Because I come from the Highlands of Scotland, having self-pride is a very tricky area. So I couldn't, I'd feel really pompous answering that question, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Because it's for others to make judgments over the work. And I'm proud of, I'm proud of everything that Russell and Stephen and Chris are doing to keep the show going in a magnificent way that they've done it and are doing it. Yeah, and I'm proud,
Yeah, no, I know you can't. I know you feel like you can't say it yourself. Yeah. I'll say it. We're all proud of you for the work that you've done.
Even that's tricky.
we like I said, when I announced this on Twitter that you were coming on, everyone was so excited because, like I said, the work that you've done spans so many eras. Like it's now to a point as well where, like, I was a child watching the first episode you did, and then an adult watching the last episode that you did for the show. So it's so cool being able to see that big span of work and how it's impacted all the different eras.
Sorry, I lost you. Everyone was so excited. I lost you for.
That's fine. No worries. It's okay. I was essentially just saying how good your work is.
That was a good way to leave it then.
Yeah. And just last few questions. Just a quick one from Escape from Tracken, at Escape Tracken on Twitter. He said that the Power of Three was the final story filmed for Karen and Arthur on the show, which I wasn't aware of. I didn't know that it was filmed that way around. What was it like on their final day on set?
Well, there's a story there. Everybody at Doctor Who used to say that the Power of Three was the episode that never finished filming.
Yeah.
It was kind of true, because we spent a whole summer doing bits of it because it was such a bitty episode. And so the day it was supposed to be the last day was the moment where they all get on the TARDIS together with the doctor. The two of them get on the TARDIS with the Doctor and leave.
Yeah.
At the end of the episode. And we filmed it on a stage in a school, literally on a school stage theatre. And it was the kind of point of view out into the back garden, and it was all sort of dressed with flowers and plants and everything like that. And I remember previous execs turned up, and it was a bit of a sort of number. The first director turned up that had done their era, and that's always a bit of a distraction for me when stuff that's not going to appear on screen is happening. It gets a little bit boring, because you're just trying to do your day's work, and because you can't really put up a sign saying this was their last day. So, but I remember the very last thing that was supposed to be the last thing was Matt and Karen and Arthur all got into the TARDIS and shut the doors, and I shouted cut really quietly, and everybody just stayed really still for ages, and they didn't come out. And they weren't coming out at all, And then I heard laughter from inside, and they sort of rolled out, because they couldn't keep. But I was just going to leave them in there forever, and not. But sadly, as the way of things, so it was all beautifully done and everything. Sadly, as the way of things, I think it was Stephen decided that we needed one more scene from them, so we had to do a pickup scene with them. Yeah. About weeks later, so they had to come back and do another final scene, and it was the scene where they're in bed together, and that was their last scene. So it was actually done without much, grandeur.
Yeah, they got all of the celebration out of the way the first time, and when they come back, everyone's like, "Oh, you've already left.
Yeah,
you've had your fun."
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
That's somebody I'm proud of. Is Karen Gillan? What an amazing thing she's doing with her directing.
Oh yeah, what a career already. I mean, obviously going on to massive films.
Well, a connection that most people don't know or care about is that Karen is also from the Highlands of Scotland, so she's from just outside Inverness. So our banter on set was very Highland, and I can't repeat any of it on air, but it was very Highland.
Well, it's always cool when you see like people that started out on Doctor Who. Well, obviously, it was very early on in her career, and now she's going on and she's just a massive star. It's always cool to see that. Tom Vance. Tom always asks a few strange questions, and this isn't even the strangest one he's asked. He's asked, which of the Doctors would beat you in an arm wrestle?
I refer you to my earlier question. I wouldn't like to. All of them.
All of them. All 13.
Yeah. All 13.
That's a great answer. I'd like to see you and Hartnell going at it.
I think all of them, because I'm a director and I'd let them.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You don't want you don't want anyone upset on set.
No, at all.
Jamie at Jamie Aspinall 1 on Twitter has said, "Do you have any tips for aspiring directors?"
Yeah, there is only one tip, Jamie, and it is to go and direct. That's the tip.
Yeah.
There are two types of people in the world. There's people who talk about directing, people who direct. So get out this evening with your camera phone and direct something and put it together. And then the second part of directing is showing it to someone. So just get an edit app on your phone, put something together, copy a scene in Doctor Who if you want with friends, start directing, and then direct some more, and then direct some more.
Yeah.
The tip is start directing. That's the tip.
Yes. It's a great tip. It's perfect. And I'm going to substitute a word in this.
All right.
Because obviously we know it's a word that we don't want to use. What was your favourite creature to work with on the show?
That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I think I've got to say that and listen. The one that was under the blanket.
Well, they actually put in the question in brackets, blanket man in listen counts.
Yeah.
So
because I remember Stephen talking to me about that scene, and he said, "I'm going to give you a creature that we can't see, we can't hear, and neither can the characters." And I went, "Okay, that's going to be interesting. It's a challenge." And although you do glimpse the creature in a tiny flash frame that a lot of people miss, the creature is in there. If you slow down that scene at the end.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go back and watch.
It's there. There's a flash frame of something there. A face.
Was there a design process? Did you actually design a creature to go under the blanket that wasn't seen?
That was just Stephen's plan was to scare people by not having a creature. So
I love that.
So did I. But tried directing it. It was really fiddly. It was really tough.
That it was.
And all the actors did great work in there as well, because they have to believe it, and that's when the audience start believing it.
Yeah.
Well, particularly Peter and Jen did great work in there.
Yeah. It's a great scene. It's one of my favorites. One of my favorite scenes.
But I did like the Ice Warrior as well.
Yes, I can imagine. It's a recurring theme that you've brought back a couple of classics, haven't you?
Yeah.
Which maybe one day in the future you'll do it again. Who knows?
Well, I'd love to have a go at the Daleks one day.
Yeah.
That's missing from my CV.
Yeah. Have you been sending Chris emails about the Yeti as well?
No, I'm just waiting. It happened before. After I did the Centaurans, it sort of didn't fit for me for a couple of years, doing other work, and then suddenly I got into a little loop that was really great for me, doing Doctor Who and Line of Duty together over like 3 or 4 years, and that was for all sorts of different reasons, and Line of Duty just been going out on Saturday night on BBC One now, so people can watch it again. But those were important shows, important times. So. Sorry, I've forgotten the question there, but favorite creature, the blanket.
Yes, the blanket. Well, we're gonna wrap it up there. It's been lovely to chat to you. I've just got one question that I ask everybody at the end before we finish, and that question is loosely, doesn't have to be in a sentence, because everyone always struggles with this one. In a sentence, what does Doctor Who mean to you?
What Doctor Who means to me is that moment on the TARDIS with David Tennant where he said, it feels like you're 8 years old and you have to be an adult at the same time. So I felt the other way around when I was watching it as a kid, and now I feel it as an adult, that it's so special as a show because it digs in under the skin of everybody, and it's such a its value system, its morality, its attitude to life. It's for the people sitting at the back of the class who don't have a place to go, and I was one of those guys. And it feels. I mean, in the end, Doctor Who feels like home to me. Yeah, that's it.
That's perfect. It's home to us all.
Yeah.
So yeah, and look, like I said before we go, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Because I can talk about Doctor Who all day, but getting to speak to you about some of my favourite episodes that you worked on is so cool. And I hope everyone at home has enjoyed this as well, because I'm sure they will have.
Thanks very much, Josh. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Who Knew, a Doctor Who podcast. You can check us out wherever you get your podcasts and now on YouTube. Please subscribe and leave us a review wherever you can, as it really helps us out. And a massive thanks to the Sononauts for lending their cover of the Doctor Who theme to be the theme for the podcast.